people in racial categories such as Black were actually being seen and felt they were being seen by white people, by Latino people. And that had another level of healing that is about the larger collective and the way that even within our own healing inside of categories and so on and so forth of so-called likeness, there is something deep in us in terms of our sense of belonging to humanity that will still yearn to be seen, to be honored, to be witnessed, to be able to be whole in the presence of people that are not like us.
Welcome to Point of Relation with Thomas Hübl, a podcast that illuminates the path to collective healing at the intersection of science and mysticism. In his conversations with visionaries, innovators, artists, and healers, Thomas invites guests into a relational experience that allows inspiration and innovation to emerge. This is the Point of Relation. The following interview was recorded during a previous Collective Trauma Summit, an online gathering convened annually by Thomas Hübl to share ideas and inspire action for healing, individual, ancestral, and collective trauma. Visit collectivetraumasummit.com to listen to featured talks from our most recent summit and sign up to be the first to know when the next summit is announced. Called the most intriguing African-American Buddhist by Library Journal, Reverend Kyodo Williams has been bridging the worlds of transformation and justice since her critically acclaimed book, Being Black, Zen and the Art of Living with Fearlessness and Grace, was hailed as an act of love by Pulitzer Prize winner Alice Walker and a classic by Buddhist pioneer Jack Kornfield. Rev Angel applies wisdom teachings and embodied practice and is a leading voice for transformative social change.
Welcome back to the Collective Trauma Summit. My name is Thomas Hübl. My heartfelt pleasure. It's really heartfelt to welcome a Reverend Angel Kyodo Williams. So, Rev Angel, a warm welcome. I'm so happy to see you.
I'm very happy to see you too. It's been some time.
Yes. I had such a joy. You came on and I felt, wow, it's so lovely. It's lovely seeing you. And since we didn't talk for a long time now, maybe you can tell me a little bit what are you on fire about right now? So what's your leading edge in your work that really sparks your own, interest and exploration? And maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, over the course of the pandemic that we have all shared some experience with, we unexpectedly started a little sitting group that we just thought, well, people need some kind of way to navigate what they are working with. It was very early on, and we just figured, 2 weeks maybe, and 2 and plus years later, we have this lovely sitting group that has extended itself into lots of other spaces, incredibly diverse, a very, very wide range of people, backgrounds, ages, races, genders, expressions, all from people from pretty, I would say, North American centric, but people all over the world still. And that has been absolutely lovely. I was sharing with them just last night that, this is something that was truly a co-creation. I could say that I started it, but it was co-created not only by the people that help hold the space and the people that show up, all of the days. It's like 6 days a week, but it's also co-created by the conditions, and it feels so like such a truth about how we can be resilient with practice. In the face of difficulty, in the face of challenge. I frankly don't believe that we would have been able to come together in this way and stick it through if it had not been for the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So that's been very exciting. And it also brought me around to what feels like the, really big, juicy project that I'm working on right now, is that I just stepped into the role of, maybe it's, I say it's a CEO, and I say if people want to think it's Chief Executive Officer, they can think so, but it's Chief Enlightenment Officer of a company called Mindful. That was closed. Their physical locations were closed by the pandemic, and I helped create a training. And so, this notion that we can engage practice online has just been a tremendous boon for me to come to understand and to give room for it, and and not be so rigid that like it all has to happen directly and in person. And that's a testimony to hear what we're doing right now.
Exactly. Oh, wow. That's amazing. Maybe you can speak a little bit, since you have a long-term practice. And when we look at the world, we see more and more disruption. We see many challenges, and there were before also. But now I think we are facing more and more collective pressure. And like, how does our practice, because there's trauma and collective trauma and all that we're going to talk about in a minute, but then there is the practice, like a resourcing from a deeper spiritual or contemplative practice to do that work well. And so maybe you can speak a little bit how they two are, because you combine them beautifully in your own path.
Yeah, it's kind of unexpected. We have a culture, especially in the West, that is considered very self-centered. And many times, we have practices and come out of traditions, myself, included, that is talking about no self, and how do we let the self, go away. And my experience has been that actually it is the other way around, and that what we need to do is to give people permission and the conditions and the resources to be able to actually work with themselves. That actually we're not whole selves. Oftentimes, we're fragmented by trauma, by the not just the trauma of ordinary, the ways that life happens, but really, the cultural conditions that are amplified and by way of these divisions and politics and wars that we see, that those things actually show up. And if we're not able to have permission to really try to find a sense of wholeness through our own personal practice, then we can't be good contributors to an understanding of and a healing of collective trauma, or collective anything for that matter. Too often we leave ourselves out of the sense of collective, not in a way that is just about like, oh, it's all about me, but rather I'm also part of the collective. And so my healing is necessary in order for me to be a contributor. And I think many of us that are in lots of spiritual practices are kind of avoiding the deep personal work that has to be done under the guise of being selfless. And that, I think, is a misstep for us.
Right. And so when we take that now and we look, okay, trauma in a way also hurts our belonging, hurts our sense of relationships, hurts our communal health, hurts many things, or collective trauma. So when you speak maybe a little bit about belonging, restoring belonging, how do we create, because our summit this year is also how do we create a collective healing movement. So it's more about we together, as a movement, create healing in the world. So maybe you can speak a little bit about belonging, restoring belonging, how collective containers are important for collective healing.
You do it from the lens that you've been doing it, and brought it through beautifully. I think that we have under explained or given having a conversation about the ways in which systems of power and oppression, wars that impact us, cultural ways of doing things that oppress, the wholeness of people or divide people. The way the mechanism works is actually to undermine our sense of belonging. or corrupt, I want to say corrupt our sense of belonging. So in other words, in order to belong to what is kind of the club of a culture and a cultural way of doing things, and these are the norms and this is how you should be if you want to belong, what we do is we end up giving up our sense of what I call an own belonging, right? A trueness to ourselves, an honoring of ourselves and the uniqueness that we have. And that creates an incredible fracture. And I think that gives rise to an underlying very, very persistent experience of low-level trauma. Sometimes it becomes more acute, but I think everyone that has to labor under the experience of whether it is a broad culture or within one's own family or within one's own community, this sense of having to exchange one's trueness to oneself, one's own belonging for belonging to something that is external to oneself, even if it's your family. But certainly, through nation states and political divisions and so on. I've spoken many times around that the core mechanism of the divisions of peoples by way of race, particularly along the binaries of Black and white in the United States, was exactly organized by undermining people's sense of belonging. If you wanted to belong to this nation, the new forming nation, as a person in a so-called white body, then you had to reject these other peoples, indigenous peoples and African peoples, and so on. And so that corruption of our belonging is deeply wounding. And it is a lever for our continued divisions that occur, and so people can kind of pull on that sense of are you the real American? Are you really what is the word that they're always using? If you're patriotic and true to your country, and so it's actually pulling on this underlying sense of belonging that is deeply human, but is actually being corrupted by those views.
So now, in that kind of cultural fragmentation that hurt our belonging over long periods of time, what can we do? What do you see in your work? Like, how can we restore belonging? Because I think the interdependence of an individual and the collective as a fluid space, that we are all of it, basically, as you said also at the beginning, that is kind of often restricted through traumatic aspects. But then when we liquefy those, we find back to that. And I think the collective understanding of healing, like that we do that stuff kind of together in bigger groups and we learn. Maybe you can speak about how do we collectively restore our collective hurt belonging. We work on that so that we feel we can restore.
Yeah, I think a very big part of it is actually being able to work through and with some of the hurt and experience that we have in collective with other people that are also working through those things, and by naming them and giving a shape to them, and rather than taking them on as like this is somehow my own, because this is in many ways that's the way the corruption work. It kind of divides us, and it creates this sense of like whatever is happening to me is individual, right? Mm-hmm. We experience it personally, but it's not individual. All of these kind of larger systems or even smaller systems that work upon us in ways that are personal but not individual, because as you said, we are part of the collective, and there is this interdependence, and there is the ways in which our family shapes us can inadvertently give rise to wounding. And so by being able to be in spaces with other people that are doing the work of naming that, allowing themselves to own the truth of it, and then coming to recognize that, this is not I experience it uniquely, but I'm not the only one having that experience. And then we find our sense of relationality through our suffering, through the pain and traumas that we experience, rather than trying to hide them away or push them away or pretend that they don't exist. And through that sitting group that we have, we call it the no big deal sit. and because when we started it, people was sort of, I was like, look, we don't want any kind of, special ways of being. We don't want people to posture. You just come as you are. And that was the first tenet. And so it's no big deal. Like, however it is that you are, in your pajamas, maybe haven't showered for a few days. If you come in late or so on, like, it's no big deal. Like, what we're doing is really being ordinary. And in that practice of people slowly coming to realize that they could bring the whole of themselves, the wounded parts of themselves, the like not together part of themselves, paradoxically, healing began to occur, and they felt themselves and experienced themselves more whole as a result of the collective, and simultaneously could be more true to the collective and feel themselves a part of the collective. And so both things are operating. The collective is strengthened by the person's individual personal healing that happens, and people are healed by the fact of the collective being, the collective container being strong enough and resilient enough to be able to manage and hold space for the journey that we work through our healing.
That's so beautiful. That's exactly how I also experienced it, and you framed it very beautifully. It's lovely. It's great. It's a beautiful process to see how these collectives evolve through the healing. With every healing, that's so beautifully put. Yeah, and living in a system of ongoing racial injustice and ongoing traumatization, and at the same time trying to find ways how to heal that and develop healing. So there's healing within a traumatizing environment. And can you speak a little bit your experience to that, like the complexity of, being in an environment where my defense mechanisms are actually needed, when in fact in the healing work, I'm resourcing myself to soften those and to integrate the prior trauma. But so that's a complex process. And yeah, I would love to hear how you experienced it.
Yeah, it is quite complex. I once had this conversation with a Zen teacher, senior teacher, and she was saying something to me about, working with a Black student. And she said, well, I would really, I really want her to work with her self-esteem. And I looked and I was like, Black people don't get self-esteem. We have always a reference by the collective. We are moved through our lives from the beginning to end, referenced upon and referencing ourselves as a part of a collective. And so the result of that is, as you said, is that there are times in which it is helpful for our healing to be able to soften, and yet we have to navigate the fact that there's an underlying sense of threat or lack of safety in so many different spaces, and you don't know where it arises. And it's not a lack of safety because you are you and you did a particular thing, or you did something questionable, but rather because of the body that you inhabit. And so this is, it's very nuanced. It's something that we're, really just beginning to start to tease apart, that there is, we are simultaneously one, and there are also extraordinary differences as a result of cultural shaping of such a history of trauma and division and impact on particular peoples, that there are certain ways in which healing unfolds that is, I wouldn't just say like, it's like especially complex and entangled, so that healing processes, therapeutic processes, they're not neutral. They're not just like, this is how this happens. It's like this happens in different ways, and we have to navigate a different set of circumstances as a result of living inside of a larger collective that has imposed certain shapings upon us as a result of, our so-called racial category. And so what we have one of the things that's quite particular, and I'm sure many people have heard, is we talk about work of like affinity groups or caucusing that allows people that identify in particular categories, be that race or gender or being trans or some other kind of identity, can begin the work in a sort of smaller subset of people of at least perceived shared experience by that those larger sets of conditions that are imposed upon them, and that begins to allow people to recognize that they're not alone, that that their experience is not alone, but also how necessary it is to give voice to those things. Our work has been in this sit has been all kinds of races of people, and there have literally been moments where I've seen and heard Black people come and say, "I've never felt so seen in my life than being in this space," and that is incredible, because there is a need for people to be seen and recognized specifically amongst their racial categories and so forth. That may be true, but also the especially poignant thing that happened is that people in racial categories such as Black were actually being seen and felt they were being seen by white people, by Latino people. And that had another level of healing that is about the larger collective and the way that even within our own healing inside of categories and so on and so forth of so-called likeness, there is something deep in us in terms of our sense of belonging to humanity that will still yearn to be seen, to be honored, to be witnessed, to be able to be whole in the presence of people that are not like us. That's actually a part of our sense of healing. And what I'm saying is that healing that is dependent upon us only being with the same types of people, as necessary as that may be for some initial sense of safety, will always be incomplete if we can't see ourselves as part of the whole of humanity eventually.
I love that. I love that. When I listen to you, it rings very true. And it's lovely because when I I often say, like, when I look at you now, like Rev Angel in Thomas has an intra-existence in Thomas and vice versa. And when we can see each other, we confirm each other's existence within each other. So that this is a very beautiful, intimate space. And it speaks very much to what you said. It's so beautiful how you put it. Yeah, that's lovely.
Thomas, I just want to say that, I was listening to you and like allowing what you just said to really settle in. And in that moment, there arose like we say this word healing and it's like bells and whistles and fireworks are going to go off. There was just a moment of healing that just occurred just when you said that and spoke about this intimacy between us. And I felt that kind of like landing of that sense of like, oh yes, I feel that intimacy as well with you. And I don't know why, and I don't have to know why, but the fact that you recognize that, it's like it sealed, right? Some kind of place in that feels maybe questioning, or not an active like, oh, I'm wondering, and I'm not wondering like, does he like me or something like that, but just this like, am I being seen? And so when you said that's that reflection back, that you're being seen, that you're being experienced, that another human being is holding you in regard and sees you as they see themselves, not as if we are the same person, but as allowing a clear seeing, that healing, right? That in that moment that there is a healing of something that doesn't even know that it needs to be healed. And I felt that and was pausing and resting in that. And I think we all hold that, and we hold that yearning deeply in any given moment in the presence of other human beings. If we can allow ourselves to be open enough, we will recognize that we actually in each moment have a desire to be seen. and to be regarded, for our humanity, and that healing comes about in any moment that happens.
It's beautiful that you came back to it and that you expanded on it. It's beautiful, and also I also felt that. Also touched me, and it also speaks. You spoke beautifully to that we need it, but also we are the ones that can provide it. That we are both, at the same time. Like that spoke to what's my awareness of my surrounding, what's my awareness of the people that I interact with every day, and how fully do I, or presently do I bring myself. So that's
Yeah. Thank you.
So when we look at that now, how can we expand it? What do you think is ways how to create like a movement, like a collective healing movement? We all see that it's needed. I mean, if you look at dealing with political polarization, climate change, racial injustice, like there are so many things where the systems are kind of distorted and hurt and are being hurt again and again. So we need a kind of a collective answer, but how can we become a collective answer?
I believe that it lies in that recognition of the yearning that we have to be seen. And the more deeply we are in touch with an understanding and an intimate with our own yearning to be seen, that maybe there's a moment when I said that some of you felt like, well, I don't want to be seen by this person or that person, or if, there's a police officer and they're aggressive, I'm not wanting to be seen. I don't think that's true. I think that we are wanting to be seen in any given moment, and our sense of, fear for our safety, wondering whether the person might, bring about harm to us, or if we can trust them, obscures that. But underlying, and that's part of why we feel so wounded, and the divisions grow greater and greater, is because there's a sense of not being seen. Whatever your political persuasion or wherever you lie on the spectrum of politics or parties or whatever, at the end of the day, I think there is a sense of like, well, I'm trying to create the conditions for myself of safety. I may be doing it in a way that you don't agree with, but ultimately that is what human beings are trying to do. There is, we could get into like things like power and money and grabs like that, but I'm talking about the human to human connection. And when we have a perception that is not happening, that someone is not able to see us, not willing to see us, not willing to hear what it is that we're yearning for, then those divisions grow and they amplify. And then you have systems of power in which people are leveraging. Right? People talk about culture wars. They're leveraging those fears so that they're more and more amplified. And so there's actually very few kind of people pulling the strings of trying to leverage that for their own, advantages of power and so on. But most of us are just trying to figure out how we can be honored in whatever it is that our truth is. And the ground that seems so disparate, there's such a huge gap for us to cross, is impossible if we don't begin somewhere in that acknowledgement for ourselves. So I think that the way that we create a movement is by being the movement, right? By having that moment where I can say, oh, Thomas, you just said that thing to me, and I felt this experience of healing, and a sweetness and an intimacy. And I allow myself to have that. And by allowing myself to have that and to experience that and acknowledge it, I can see it more readily. I can feel it more readily in others. And as you said, I then feel the sheer power of what it means to be human and to be able to offer that to other people, right? To be in a supermarket, on the bus, and just offer kindness in a moment in which we might otherwise contract. And my definition of suffering is contraction, right? And so when we can catch ourselves contracting and notice, oh, I'm contracting in this moment. What would it be like if we can just settle in and return to our belly, to the solidity of our own being, and allow ourselves to give a little bit more space for whoever that is in front of us, for them to be themselves, and we can be ourselves. Even just a little more. We get very extreme and we want it all solved at once. It's like the movement is just like a little more. It's movement, right? It's not getting from here to there all of a sudden. It's like a little bit of movement, and so we can be the movement. By simply allowing ourselves to soften just a little bit in any given moment in which we notice contraction arising in us, with contraction withholding, right, receding, pulling away, when we can notice that. And of course, that requires practice, right, to just be able to notice, right, and then to have the will, the intention, the vow, however it is you put it, to respond to the awareness of our suffering, the awareness of our contraction, and then it unfolds quite naturally.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So what I hear is also like how in everyday life, like actually in every moment of our life, we are the movement. There's the movement, and then and then I do other things, but that we are every moment, and every interaction is part of it. So that's or
we're the anti-movement. And that's the truth. There isn't a neutral. Right. In any given moment, we are either, leaning and allowing love, right, or we're restricting and calling forth fear, and we have an opportunity at that moment to just kind of hang out in the fear, or to yield to the possibility of our yearning or connection or love, whatever word it is that you want to allow for it, and the moment that we touch it, and we notice the healing, movement has occurred.
That's beautiful, right? We're right on the energy itself. That's very beautiful. We're not talking about it. It's that which happening is being spoken. So that's a very beautiful way also of being that movement.
Yeah, and I think that's also so important for us in our quest for healing, for collective healing, is, it's lovely to talk about it. And if we let the talking about it and the idea of it, the ideation of it, surpass the direct experience, then we will have missed it.
Exactly.
Like there it is. It could be arising in that moment, and we're more thinking about it, and like, how do I get to it, and set back and feel yourself. I speak about this idea of creating the conditions, right? And so the conditions are getting quiet enough to hear yourself and still enough to feel yourself. And when you can create those conditions, whatever practice it is that allows you to create the conditions for a direct experience of what is arising in you, then you have the opportunity to take action by way of either allowing or restricting yourself, right? And we're all responsible that way. There's not someone out there that is going to, Thomas is lovely and Thomas is not responsible for, our collective healing. You're bringing about incredible voices that will bring different angles and talk about things that will strike our hearts. But at the end of the day, if each of us in that moment, that opportunity that is right there in front of you with your child, your lover, your parent, the big guy that I sat next to on an airplane, and I was sure that he was going to like mansplain all over the place, and instead at some point I looked up and he was moving the blanket carefully to make sure that I didn't get awakened. And he wasn't at all who, if you looked at it from externally, who he could have been. And we had this moment of intimacy and sweetness and healing simply from seeing each other. And if I was closed off to that, then it wouldn't have happened, and the movement would have taken that one step back. So we are that movement in any given moment. It isn't happening someplace. It's not on a voting card. It's not on we should vote. Yes, but it's not in a politician's office. It's not about who gets voted or not voted or what policies occur. It's really about how we show up in each moment and whether or not we are willing to commit ourselves to take this very small actions within our own beings to allow healing to occur for ourselves and to witness each other, to see and be seen.
Yeah, I so deeply resonate with what you say. It's so true. I spoke with the poet David White for the summit, and he said a beautiful sentence. He said, when we heal, our voice becomes revelatory. That like what then we're not talking about, in my words, I would say we're not talking about, we are talking from. So we are transmitting it because we're not separate inside anymore. So our words are what we are, is what we say. And a lot in when I listen to you, I feel the directness of the words and your energy reaching me while we speak. And it seems it just lands in me. It's just a landing. So that's very beautiful. And that speaks also to what you shared. Like that's also my experience when I listen to you.
I think that's why when I saw you, I felt the same way, that quality. And what you're saying is so important because in a vast quagmire of, climate crises and the crises of human beings upon the planet and our disregard for, treating the earth as a place that we live and love and need to be, and wars and so on, it can feel very much like, well, how is that going to help? Like, how is that going to help? So great. You and Thomas are like gazing at each other, and that's very sweet. But how is that going to help? And what you just said is exactly the truth. It's when we ask those questions, they arise from the place that is contracted, right, and whole and fearful. And the fear is, there's nothing wrong with having the fear. The fear is evidence of the yearning. The fear that we have that something is not going to work out is evidence of our yearning. And so, in fact, when people are resistant or, they push back with things that I say, I'm like, oh, yeah, you're the most desirous of it, right? You're the most desiring of connection. You're the most desiring of that yearning and recognizing that yearning. And so it's a good thing to have that sense of fear, but also to recognize that is evidence of your yearning. And what Thomas said about, you speak from it. It when you're shifting internally, then you are the transmission of that healing. Mm-hmm. And until that is true for us, and that's maybe difficult for many of us to hear, until that is true, until we're working with ourselves in that way, so that we have our own direct experience of, oh, yes, I feel what that is in me. I feel when I'm talking about something and talking from something. And then you'll be able to witness the alchemy of that transmission happening and creating healing. And then the question of like, how does that happen? Will be less of a question. It'll become apparent to you that you carry the torch of whatever it is that is needed for your particular space, that you don't have to necessarily go and try to solve all of the problems of the world, but you can be healing in the spaces and environments that you inhabit, wherever it is that you live and love. And I have watched that for the last couple years in this space with these people. I would say once upon a time, I knew it in my heart, but I didn't have enough, and I knew it in my own experience. But what I have done over the last couple of years is I have had the opportunity to watch, we're generally anywhere from 30 to 50 people, sometimes upwards of 80 people every day, create the conditions of healing for themselves and with other people. And most often without my intervention. So this is not about like there has to be this teacher there that is doing things and telling people special things. It is that there are sufficient conditions, there's enough commitment to the conditions of healing and liberation for each person, that they have allowed for enough space and room for the healing and liberation of the other people that are there with them. And I've watched it for 2 years with an incredible diversity of human beings. No shared tradition, no shared culture, no shared anything really other than this commitment.
That's very beautiful. It's also very heartwarming to watch. I think that the fact that you can witness that and that it starts to happen by itself, that's so heartwarming, because that sounds to me so true, that systems start to heal themselves and the right conditions are being, when there's the right environment.
Well, I know that I have watched, and visited in spaces and watched that kind of healing unfolding, and it's not as far as it can feel like it is right now. And in so many ways, we may have to experience actually a little bit more pain in order to deepen our commitment to to stepping into the uncomfortable places of that healing requires of us. I hope it won't have to get too bad. But we are all responsible for our collective healing, and we are all the collective.
That's true. You said something else that I want to underline that's also beautiful, is that nobody needs to save the entire planet, but every one of us does their, we all do our gardening. And then the flowers, the whole planet can flourish, but we need to do our gardening. If we don't do that, then the plants around us are not growing. And that's important. That's a beautiful framing. One question I had just before, when you look at, you're doing your work already for a longer time, and you can see already like a trajectory, for example, in the United States. What are the things that you see are changing? Because we see often, and also the news are full of, all the stuff that seems to be problematic and painful. And of course, that's also true, except it's being changed. But then there are many things that are happening that are really beautiful. Like when you speak about your group and when you see people flourishing and they touch other people and that starts flourishing. And so how do you see in over the course that you do your work, what did you see is changing or shifting that touched you, or that you recognize, oh, it's beautiful that's happening?
Yeah, I have a body of work called Radical Dharma. I wrote a book by that name, and out of that book, Radical Dharma, Talking Race, Love, and Liberation, a body of work emerged in which we went into spaces. We said, it's great to have a, book and read about it. And, please do, get the book and read about it. But it is important that we have direct experience. And so we created what we called experiences, one of which we have had is called camp, and people go to, it's like a camp. And we come together and kind of just get thrown in. And over the course of the years prior to the pandemic, through the pandemic, and up until now, we just had 3 camps over the summer. I have seen so much more willingness on people's part to grapple with the challenging questions of what it is that divides us. I have seen so much more willingness. I attribute this to the pandemic and the uprisings around the murder of George Floyd in the United States, as particular catalyst. It's not the only thing, but particular catalyst for this. But I have seen so much more willingness for people to grapple with the ways in which we have been divided, and to be honest about their own gains and advantages that result from injustice and imbalance and inequities in our society. That's all well and good, and that sounds, very good on paper. But the reason that they're willing to do it is what is extraordinary, is because people are tired of trading their humanity for material gains. And they are choosing in numbers and in ways that I have not witnessed, and I've been doing this work for a long time, very, very deep and a wide and a far wider variety of people are just stepping in, and it happens much quicker. So that speaks to the collective momentum. Mm-hmm. Right. And so we used to do these camps before the pandemic when we first started this 2016 to 2017, and it was like, okay, we have to have these definitions and now it's just like people are just right there. And so the work transpires more quickly. And so that's another positive aspect of each of us doing our personal work, is that we contribute to a momentum, so that I would say, if I were to make it up, I would say what used to take us 3 days to get to, we're already at the 3-day work mark in a day. And now we're doing, we're already someplace else. And it's because people want to be whole. They want to be healed. They want to be healed. They're recognizing that these divisions are traumatizing, that they have been traumatized, that they've been carrying trauma, and that they want to be healed from that trauma, and they want to do it with other people. And that has been extraordinary. And it has been absolutely extraordinary.
Mm. Yeah, I also resonate a lot with the speeding up. So what took 3 days before is 1 day, or like that there's something is becoming more concentrated liquid, so that has a kind of intensification effect. It's very interesting, like how the integration of some people furthers the healing of others. That's an amazing principle. I have so many things that I want to talk with you about, but maybe if there's like some last words for today, and I hope we can meet again soon and continue this conversation.
I love that you said underline. I really want to underscore, as a person that is sanctioned in a tradition, as a teacher, and all of those things, what I have witnessed and what I know deeply in my heart to be true is that the work that we most need to do in these times is our personal work in the presence of others. It's not enough to just do personal work, and it's not enough to just be in group work and forget that you are the collective. And it is there's no saint, or there's no Roshi or Reverend or Rinpoche that is out there that is going to save you. There's not a politician there that is going to come up with the perfect advocacy plan. That we really are the ones we have been waiting for. Mm. It's been so often said, and now is the time that we've been waiting for. Mm. There is only one time in which our healing can happen, and that time is now.
Lovely closure of the journey that we are on here, and very close. I feel very close to you. It was touched many times by the authenticity of your words and by the transmission. So it's very beautiful. Thank you very much. It was a very lovely time for me here with you.
Yeah, thank you. It's lovely to see you and to feel and reconnect with the resonance of your voice and your truth, and just the deep heartfulness that I feel from you every time we are in a space.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Visit CollectiveTraumaSummit.com to listen to more talks like this one, and to sign up and be the first to know when the next Collective Trauma Summit is announced. Thanks for listening to Point of Relation with Thomas Hübl. Stay connected and get updates about new episodes by visiting our website, pointofrelationpodcast.com, and by subscribing to the Thomas Hübl YouTube channel. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share about us with your community on social media. Thank you. We appreciate your support.